My name is Harper Matthews, I'm 28, and tonight I'm standing frozen in the middle of my stepmother Elaine's charity gala as security approaches to escort me out. "You're just a waitress," she laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. The cruel words stung, but what they didn't know was that my husband, the billionaire secretly funding this entire event, was about to walk through those doors. Years of their ridicule was about to come full circle in the most unexpected way. If you're curious about what happened next in this ballroom full of Boston's elite, stick around. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about family drama and sweet revenge. To understand why my stepmother would publicly humiliate me at her gala, we need to go back to the beginning. I was born to Thomas and Rachel Matthews, and for the first 8 years of my life, we were the picture-perfect family. Dad built his business from the ground up, creating a successful investment firm that catered to Boston's upper class. Mom was his rock, handling the social connections and charity work that came with Dad's growing success. She made sure I remained grounded despite our privileged lifestyle. Then, when I was 8, my world shattered. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 6 months, she was gone. Dad was devastated. He threw himself into work, leaving me with a rotation of nannies who provided care but couldn't fill the enormous void Mom left behind. For 2 years, it was just Dad and me fumbling through life without her. Then Elaine Parker entered our lives at a charity function. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and seemed genuinely interested in both Dad and me. At least, that's what I thought as a 10-year-old desperate for maternal affection. Within a year, they were married, and Elaine moved into our home with her daughter Madison, who happened to be exactly my age. I was initially excited to have a sister, but that excitement quickly faded. The changes were subtle at first. Madison got the slightly larger bedroom. She received more presents at Christmas. Her achievements were celebrated lavishly while mine earned a cursory "good job." But as months passed, the discrepancy in our treatment became impossible to ignore. "Harper, please use the other bathroom. Madison needs her privacy," Elaine would say, relegating me to the guest bathroom while Madison enjoyed the one we were supposed to share. "Harper, Madison needs new riding boots for her lessons. We'll have to postpone getting you those art supplies." Somehow my needs always got postponed. The worst part was watching Dad slowly distance himself from me. He worked longer hours, took more business trips, and when he was home, Elaine expertly monopolized his attention. She'd schedule family activities when she knew I had other commitments, then paint me as the difficult child who didn't want to participate. "Thomas, I'm trying so hard with her, but she just won't let me in," I overheard her say one night, fake tears in her voice. My father, exhausted and emotionally drained, simply nodded and patted her hand. Through my teenage years, I threw myself into school and part-time jobs. While Madison enjoyed shopping sprees and European vacations, I worked at the local library and saved up for college. I didn't want to ask Dad for anything because each request had to go through Elaine, who made me feel like a burden on the family finances despite Dad's considerable wealth. There were rare moments, though, when Dad would break through the fog and really see me. He came to my high school art exhibition when Elaine and Madison conveniently had scheduling conflicts. He looked at my paintings with tears in his eyes. "You have your mother's talent," he whispered, and for that brief moment, I had my dad back. The summer after my freshman year of college, Dad had a massive heart attack in his office. By the time I rushed to the hospital, he was gone. I wasn't even given the chance to say goodbye. The funeral was a blur of faces and empty condolences. Elaine played the grieving widow perfectly, while I sat numb with shock. It wasn't until the reading of the will that I understood how completely I'd been pushed out of my father's life. Dad left the bulk of his estate to Elaine, with Madison receiving substantial trust funds and real estate. I was left with just enough money to cover my remaining college tuition and a small inheritance that would barely fund a year of living expenses after graduation. Your father wanted to make sure you learned the value of hard work, Elaine explained with false sympathy when I questioned the disparity. Madison has different needs. The truth hit me hard. My father had either forgotten me or had been convinced I didn't need his financial support. Either possibility was heartbreaking. After the will was settled, Elaine made it clear I wasn't welcome in the family home anymore. You're an adult now, Harper. It's time you found your own place, she said coolly as I packed my childhood bedroom. Madison watched from the doorway, smirking. Don't worry about holiday dinners, Madison added. Our traditions are changing anyway. I was officially excommunicated from the Matthews family, keeping only my father's last name as proof I had ever belonged. For the next few years, I had minimal contact with Elaine and Madison. They'd send a generic birthday card or Christmas greeting to maintain appearances to mutual acquaintances, but there were no phone calls, no invitations, no genuine interest in my life. I graduated with honors, found a job at a small but well-respected art gallery in Boston, and built a life for myself, determined to never again seek validation from people who saw me as disposable. Little did I know that life was about to take an unexpected turn that would eventually bring me face to face with the family that discarded me in circumstances none of us could have predicted. At 24, I had settled into my life at Westfield Gallery, a boutique art space in Boston that specialized in emerging artists. The pay wasn't spectacular, but I loved discovering new talent and helping artists navigate the intimidating art world. My tiny studio apartment in Cambridge was all mine, and I'd found a small circle of loyal friends who knew nothing about my family drama, exactly how I preferred it. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in April when Nathan Reed walked into the gallery. The space was empty except for me, cataloging a new shipment of sculptures. I didn't immediately recognize him, though in retrospect, I should have. Nathan's tech company, Reed Innovations, had been making headlines for years, and at 32, he was already on Forbes' list of most influential entrepreneurs. But that day, he was just a tall, slightly rain-dampened man in a casual button-down shirt and jeans, looking intently at a collection of abstract paintings. "Can I help you find anything specific?" I asked, approaching him with my standard greeting. He turned and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his hazel eyes. "I'm just browsing, though I'm curious about this artist." He gestured to the paintings he'd been examining. "That's Lucia Mendez. She's relatively new, but her work on urban isolation is getting a lot of attention," I explained, falling easily into my element. The way she uses negative space to represent emotional voids in city life is particularly striking. We spent the next hour discussing art, with me showing him around the gallery and explaining the stories behind various pieces. What impressed me was his genuine interest. Nathan asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers, unlike the typical wealthy collectors who often treated gallery staff as mere transaction facilitators. "You really know your artists," he commented as I wrapped up our impromptu tour. "I believe in what they're creating," I replied simply. "It's easy to be passionate about work that matters." He nodded thoughtfully. "I feel the same way about technology. When it's designed to solve real problems, not just make money, that's when it's worth investing in." As he was leaving, he handed me his business card. "I'm interested in supporting some of these artists. Could we continue this conversation over coffee sometime?" Only when I looked at the card did I realize who I'd been talking to. Nathan Reed, CEO and founder of Reed Innovations. I tried not to let my surprise show as I agreed to coffee later that week. Our coffee meeting turned into dinner when our conversation about art extended beyond the cafe's closing time. Nathan was refreshingly down-to-earth for someone of his status. He talked about growing up in a middle-class Seattle family, his parents both teachers who emphasized education and creativity. They thought I was crazy when I dropped out of grad school to start my company, he admitted with a laugh. But they supported me anyway. Sent me care packages of homemade granola when I was living on ramen and working 20-hour days. I found myself sharing more than I intended to, telling him about my work, my apartment, my dreams of eventually opening my own gallery focused on therapeutic art programs for children. I carefully avoided any mention of my family situation, sticking to the present rather than my past. After that first dinner, we began seeing each other regularly. Nathan would stop by the gallery with lunch, or we'd meet after work to try new restaurants around the city. He never flaunted his wealth, often suggesting simple activities like walks along the Charles River or visits to small museum exhibitions. Money complicates things, he told me once when I asked why he lived in a modest townhouse rather than some extravagant mansion. I've seen what happens to people when they start believing they're special because of their bank accounts. I don't want to be that person. 3 months into our relationship, I still hadn't told Nathan about my family. We were sitting on his rooftop terrace one evening when he gently broached the subject. "You never talk about your family," he observed, his tone careful. "I've told you all about my parents' terrible jokes and my sister's eco-warrior lifestyle, but I know nothing about yours." I stared at my glass of wine, debating how much to share. There's not much to tell. My mom died when I was 8. My dad remarried, then he died too. My stepmother and I aren't close. Nathan didn't push, but his silence created a space that I unexpectedly wanted to fill. That night, I told him everything about Elaine's manipulation, Madison's cruelty, my father's emotional abandonment, and my eventual exclusion from the family. The hardest part isn't the money, I admitted, tears finally breaking through my carefully constructed composure. It's knowing that my father died believing I didn't need him, that somehow I wasn't worth fighting for. Nathan listened without interruption, his hand steady around mine. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or express pity. Instead, he said, "They failed you, Harper." Not the other way around. The simple statement broke something open inside me. For years, I'd carried the unspoken fear that perhaps I'd been unlovable, difficult, somehow deserving of being cast aside. Nathan's words began a healing process I hadn't realized I desperately needed. As our relationship deepened, Nathan never pressured me to reconnect with Elaine and Madison. He understood my need for distance and respected the boundaries I'd established. Instead, he introduced me to his own family. His warm, welcoming parents who treated me like a daughter from our first meeting, and his sister Lily who quickly became the sibling I'd always wanted. After a year together, Nathan proposed during a weekend trip to Provincetown. It wasn't an elaborate production, just the two of us walking on the beach at sunset when he stopped, took both my hands, and asked if I'd build a life with him. "I love you for your compassion, your resilience, and your ability to see beauty in places others overlook," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You've changed how I see the world, Harper. I want to face whatever comes next with you beside me." We married 2 months later in a small ceremony at Nathan's parents' home in Seattle. It was intimate, with only 30 guests, close friends, and Nathan's family. No one from my side attended because there was no one to invite. Elaine and Madison had no idea I was even in a relationship, let alone getting married to one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. It wasn't about shame or secrecy. It was about protection. The life I was building with Nathan was precious to me, untainted by the toxicity of my past. I had no desire to invite that negativity back into my world, even to showcase my happiness. After our honeymoon in Japan, we settled into married life in a new home in Brookline. I continued working at the gallery, insisting on making my own way professionally despite Nathan's wealth. He supported my independence, understanding that my career was about personal fulfillment, not financial necessity. For 2 years, we lived in a bubble of happiness that had nothing to do with Nathan's success or money. We traveled, worked on our respective passions, and began planning for children. Elaine and Madison remained firmly in my past, where I intended them to stay. Then the invitation arrived. The cream-colored envelope with embossed gold lettering appeared in our mailbox on a Tuesday. I almost discarded it with the other formal invitations Nathan regularly received, But the return address caught my eye, the Matthews Family Foundation. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was an invitation to the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala, hosted by Elaine Matthews. A handwritten note was paper-clipped to the invitation. "Harper, it's been too long. We should reconnect. The family misses you. Elaine." I stared at the flowing script, looking for signs of sincerity and finding none. In the 2 years since I'd married Nathan, and the 6 years since my father's death, Elaine had made exactly 0 attempts to contact me. The family certainly hadn't missed me when I was struggling to pay rent during college, or when I graduated with no one in the audience to cheer for me. When Nathan came home that evening, I was still sitting at the kitchen island, the invitation laid out before me. "What's that?" he asked, kissing my cheek before noticing my expression. "Hey, what's wrong?" I pushed the invitation toward him. My stepmother has suddenly remembered my existence. Nathan read the invitation, his brow furrowing. "The Boston Children's Hospital benefit? That's..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "That's what?" I prompted, noticing his hesitation. He sat down beside me with a sigh. "That's one of the events the Reed Foundation is sponsoring this year. We're the primary donor, actually." "Wait, what?" I felt like I'd missed something crucial. "Your foundation is funding Elaine's gala?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't know it was connected to your stepmother. The foundation staff handles most of the smaller partnerships, and I only review the major initiatives. The Children's Hospital is one we support annually, but I didn't realize who was chairing the event committee. The coincidence seemed too perfect to be coincidental. She must have found out about us. That's the only explanation for this sudden interest in reconnecting after all these years." "It's possible," Nathan agreed. "Your married name is Reed now, and we've been in the society pages occasionally. Someone might have mentioned it to her." I pushed the invitation away. "Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going." Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "What if we did go?" I looked at him like he'd suggested swimming with sharks. Why would I voluntarily put myself in a room with people who made it abundantly clear I wasn't good enough for them? "Because you are good enough." "More than good enough," Nathan said firmly. "And maybe there's something powerful in facing them on your own terms, not theirs." I shook my head. "There's nothing to gain. Elaine isn't suddenly going to become the loving mother figure I needed as a child. This isn't about her, Harper. It's about you finding closure," Nathan said gently. "You've built an amazing life despite how they treated you. Maybe seeing them again will help you finally put that chapter to rest." I considered his words. There was a certain appeal to the idea of walking into that gala confident and successful, no longer the discarded stepdaughter desperate for approval. "There's another factor to consider," Nathan added. "The Reed Foundation's involvement is anonymous for this event. Elaine doesn't know I'm the primary donor." "Why anonymous?" I asked, curious about this detail. "It's how we handle some of our philanthropy. The foundation staff thought it would generate more community involvement if it wasn't seen as just another Reed project," Nathan explained. "So officially, the gala has an anonymous benefactor." A thought began forming in my mind. So Elaine has no idea that her stepdaughter is married to the man funding her precious gala? Nathan's eyes met mine, a slight smile playing at his lips. "None whatsoever." For the first time since receiving the invitation, I felt a flicker of something other than dread. That could be interesting. We spent the next hour discussing possibilities. Nathan suggested a plan. I would attend first, alone. He would arrive later, after I'd had time to interact with Elaine and the rest of the family. The revelation of our connection would happen organically, in front of everyone. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Nathan asked after we'd worked out the details. "We can still decline the invitation. Your well-being matters more than any dramatic moment." I considered his question carefully. Part of me was terrified at the prospect of facing Elaine, Madison, and the extended family that had so easily discarded me. But another part, a stronger part, Was tired of carrying the weight of their rejection. "I want to do this," I said finally. "Not for revenge, but for resolution. I've spent too many years letting their opinion define my worth." In the weeks leading up to the gala, I vacillated between determination and anxiety. I selected a dress, a stunning midnight blue gown from an up-and-coming designer the gallery had connections with. It was elegant without being flashy, the kind of dress that communicated quiet confidence. The night before the event, lying in bed beside Nathan, my nerves resurfaced. What if this is a mistake? What if they humiliate me again? Nathan turned to face me, his expression serious. "Listen to me, Harper. You're walking in there as my wife, as a successful professional, as a woman who built herself back up after everything they tore down. Nothing they say or do can change that." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "But if at any point you want to leave, just text me. I'll drop everything and come get you. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." His unwavering support steadied me. Whatever happened tomorrow night, I wouldn't be facing it alone. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something important. For the first time, I was approaching my family not from a place of need or longing, but from a position of strength. Whether they accepted me or not no longer determined my value. That alone felt like victory. The Rosewood Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements when I arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. Attendants in crisp uniforms directed guests through the grand entrance, where a photographer captured arrivals against a backdrop bearing the Matthews Family Foundation logo. I took a deep breath, smoothed my midnight blue gown, and approached the check-in table. "Good evening, Harper Reed," I said to the young woman with the guest list. She scanned her tablet, then looked up with a smile. "Yes, Ms. Reed. Welcome to the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala." As I moved into the ballroom, I felt strangely calm. The space was already filled with Boston's elite in their finest attire, old money families, successful entrepreneurs, politicians, and celebrities. I recognized many faces from the society pages Nathan occasionally appeared in. The first familiar face I encountered belonged to my father's cousin, Patricia, who was examining the silent auction items with her husband. "Harper," she said, squinting at me in surprise. "Harper Matthews? Is that you?" "It's Harper Reed now," I corrected gently. "How are you, Aunt Patricia?" She looked me up and down with undisguised curiosity. "Well, you've certainly grown up. We haven't seen you since, goodness, was it Thomas's funeral? What have you been doing with yourself?" Before I could answer, her husband Gerald joined the conversation. "Matthews? Oh, Elaine's stepdaughter, right? Didn't know you were on the guest list this year." The subtle emphasis on this year made it clear I hadn't been included in previous events. "Elaine kindly invited me," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I understand the foundation has been doing well." Patricia nodded distractedly, her attention already drifting toward more important guests arriving behind me. Yes, very well. Elaine has quite the touch for fundraising. You should say hello to her. She's over by the main table with Madison and the Aldrich family." I followed her gesture and spotted Elaine holding court near the center of the room. At 55, she remained striking, her blonde hair expertly colored and styled, her figure maintained through rigorous exercise and, I suspected, subtle cosmetic procedures. Beside her stood Madison, now 28 like me but looking several years younger in a designer red dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my gallery salary. Taking another steadying breath, I made my way toward them, collecting a champagne flute from a passing waiter for liquid courage. Madison saw me first. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline before she leaned to whisper something in Elaine's ear. My stepmother turned, her practiced social smile freezing momentarily before transforming into something that didn't reach her eyes. "Harper." "What a surprise," Elaine exclaimed, her voice carrying enough for nearby guests to hear. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come." despite sending me an invitation with a personal note? The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. I wouldn't miss it, I replied instead. The children's hospital is such an important cause. Madison looked me over with undisguised scrutiny. Interesting dress. Is that off the rack? It's actually from an emerging designer I work with at the gallery, I explained, refusing to be baited. Oh, you're still at that little art shop? Elaine asked with exaggerated surprise. How persistent of you. Before I could respond, an older gentleman in our circle, one of the hospital board members, judging by his name tag, interjected. You work in the arts, young lady? Elaine answered before I could. Harper has always had creative aspirations. Nothing serious, of course. Actually, I countered, finding my voice. I'm the assistant director at Westfield Gallery now. We specialize in emerging artists and therapeutic art programs. The man looked interested, but Elaine smoothly redirected the conversation. Speaking of the hospital programs, Richard, you simply must hear about the new pediatric wing we're funding this year. I was effectively dismissed from the conversation. As I stepped back, Madison followed me. Seriously, Harper, why are you here? She asked, dropping all pretense of politeness now that we were out of earshot of the others. Nobody expected you to actually show up. Then why send the invitation? I challenged. Madison's smile was cold. Mom thought it would be the proper thing to do, given the anniversary of your father's death next month. She didn't think you'd have the nerve to come alone. The casual mention of my father stung. I'm not alone, actually. My husband will be joining me later. This caught Madison off guard. Husband? You're married? To whom? You'll meet him soon enough, I replied, unwilling to reveal Nathan's identity just yet. Before Madison could press further, we were interrupted by another relative, my father's brother William and his wife Susan. Is that little Harper? Uncle William boomed, clearly already enjoying the open bar. Good heavens, we thought you'd fallen off the face of the earth. Hello, Uncle William. Aunt Susan, I greeted them politely. Susan air-kissed near my cheek. Darling, where have you been hiding yourself? Elaine tells us she hardly hears from you these days. The revisionist history was breathtaking. Elaine had practically pushed me out the door after my father's death and had made zero effort to contact me in the years since. I've been focused on my career, I said simply. Life gets busy. What sort of career could possibly keep you from family? William asked with a dismissive wave. Family is everything in this world. The irony of his statement was apparently lost on him. As we spoke, I noticed more family members and old acquaintances glancing our way, whispering behind cocktail napkins. Elaine had rejoined Madison and was speaking intently to her while looking in my direction. Then Elaine did something unexpected. She approached the small stage where the band was playing and whispered to the lead musician. He nodded and stopped mid-song. Ladies and gentlemen, Elaine's voice rang out over the sound system. I want to thank you all for coming tonight to support Boston Children's Hospital. Before dinner is served, I'd like to acknowledge all the wonderful staff who are making this evening possible, our event planners, our caterers, and our serving staff. There was polite applause as Elaine gestured around the room. Then her gaze landed deliberately on me. In fact, I think there's been a bit of confusion. One of our waitstaff seems to have misplaced her uniform this evening. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd as people turned to look at me. Harper dear, Elaine continued, her voice dripping with false concern. Did you get confused about your role tonight? I know you expressed interest in helping, but guests aren't supposed to arrive until 7, and the serving staff was asked to use the service entrance. My face burned as understanding dawned. This was why she'd invited me not to reconnect, but to publicly humiliate me. Madison stepped forward, camera phone already in hand. Mom, maybe Harper just wanted to see how the other half lives for one night. We should be flattered by her aspirations. More laughter, less uncomfortable now as the wealthy crowd relaxed into the familiar territory of mockery disguised as humor. I stood frozen, champagne glass clutched in my hand as Elaine continued her performance. "Security," she called, gesturing to a man in a dark suit near the entrance. "I believe we have someone who's confused about her place here tonight. Could you please assist her to the correct area, or perhaps just escort her out if she's not actually on staff?" The security guard, looking uncomfortable but professional, began making his way toward me. My cousin Brandon, always eager to join in when someone was being targeted, called out from nearby. "Always trying to be something you're not, Harper? Some things never change." Others joined in, their voices overlapping. Did she actually think she belonged here? Always had delusions of grandeur, that one. Probably crashed the event hoping to network. The security guard reached me, his expression apologetic but firm. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to come with me. There's been a mistake," I managed to say, my voice smaller than I intended. "I was invited. I have the invitation in my purse." Elaine approached us, Madison trailing behind her like an eager shadow. "The mistake was mine, Harper. I should have been clearer about boundaries. This event is for donors and hospital supporters, not, well, whatever it is you're doing these days." She turned to the security guard. "Please see her out. Gently, of course. She is family, after all, technically speaking." Madison openly filmed the interaction on her phone, barely containing her glee. "This will make a great story for the family newsletter, Harper. Thomas Matthews' daughter escorted from charity gala. Daddy would be so proud." The mention of my father broke something inside me. I felt tears threatening, but refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. The security guard took my elbow. "Please, ma'am. Let's not make a scene." Guests were openly staring now, some with pity, others with thinly veiled amusement. I looked around at the faces of my so-called family, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who had known me since childhood, and saw not one person willing to stand up for me. As the security guard began guiding me toward the exit, I caught one last snippet of Elaine's voice addressing the curious onlookers. Family tragedy, really. Never quite found her place after her father died. We've tried to help, but some people simply don't belong in certain circles, no matter how desperately they try to force themselves in. I took one step toward the door, dignity in tatters, but determined not to break down in front of them. Then everything changed. "There must be some misunderstanding," I said to the security guard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I received a formal invitation. It's in my clutch." The guard, his name tag read Michael, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just following instructions from the event host." Behind us, Elaine's voice carried clearly. "It's always been this way with Harper. Always trying to insert herself where she doesn't belong." Madison's tinkling laugh followed. "Remember when she thought she should be included in the family portrait session for the foundation website? As if a part-time gallery assistant belongs alongside board members." I fumbled with my small evening bag, extracting the invitation with trembling fingers. "Look, here it is. I was invited." Michael glanced at the invitation, then back at Elaine, who was now walking toward us with Madison and several other family members in tow. "That's just a courtesy copy," Elaine explained smoothly to the guard. "We send them to extended family for awareness, not necessarily as actual invitations." I'm sure Harper misunderstood. My cousin Brandon, now 30 and still as cruel as he'd been as a teenager, had joined the growing circle around us. Classic Harper move. Remember that time she showed up at grandmother's 80th birthday after specifically being told it was immediate family only? "I was grandmother's only granddaughter by blood," I retorted, finally finding my voice. "You were the one who convinced her I shouldn't be included." Brandon shrugged, unapologetic. "You never fit in with us, Harper. Not then, not now. Some people just don't know when they're not wanted." The crowd of onlookers had grown. I recognized faces from Boston Society pages, potential donors, and hospital board members, all witnessing my humiliation. Several had their phones out. Madison wasn't the only one documenting this debacle. Please, I said to Michael, just let me stay until my husband arrives. He's on his way. Elaine laughed loudly at this. Husband? Oh, Harper. There's no need to invent a fictional spouse to save face. I'm not inventing anything, I insisted, anger beginning to override embarrassment. His name is... Harper, Elaine cut me off sharply. This is beneath even you. Crashing a charity gala is one thing, but lying about being married? That's just sad. Madison scrolled through her phone, then held it up triumphantly. I've been following your Instagram, Harper. There's not a single post about a husband or even a boyfriend. Just sad little pictures of art gallery openings and your studio apartment. I felt sick realizing Madison had been stalking my social media. I deliberately kept my relationship with Nathan off social platforms, not out of shame, but because we both valued our privacy. Not everything in my life is posted online, I said tightly. Convenient excuse, Madison smirked. So, where is this mystery husband? Running late? Or maybe he doesn't exist at all. I checked my watch. Nathan would be arriving in about 15 minutes, according to our plan. If I could just stall until then. But Elaine had clearly decided the entertainment had gone on long enough. Michael, please escort Ms. Matthews out now. We have actual donors waiting to be seated for dinner. It's Mrs. Reed, I corrected automatically. Oh please, Madison rolled her eyes. Next you'll be claiming you married a celebrity. My Uncle William, now thoroughly enjoying the spectacle, chimed in. Thomas would be so disappointed, Harper. He raised you better than this, making scenes at public events, telling transparent lies. The mention of my father, again, hit me like a physical blow. You don't get to talk about my father. None of you do. You all stood by while Elaine systematically erased me from his life. A hush fell over the immediate crowd. Elaine's expression hardened. That's quite enough, she hissed, dropping the pleasant hostess facade. You always were an ungrateful, difficult child. Thomas did everything for you, and it was never enough. Everything. I laughed incredulously, no longer caring about making a scene. He left me with barely enough money for college tuition, while Madison got trust funds and real estate. Because Madison appreciated what she was given. Elaine snapped. You were always so determined to prove your independence, to reject the family's help and connections. What help? What connections? I demanded. From the moment you married my father, you made it clear I wasn't part of your vision for the family. Madison stepped between us. You're embarrassing yourself, Harper. No one wants to hear your victim story. It's not a story, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. You and your mother systematically isolated me from my father, then pushed me out completely after he died. Your father knew exactly what he was doing with his will, Elaine said coldly. He understood you'd squander anything substantial he left you on your impractical artistic pursuits. My father supported my art before you came into our lives, I retorted. He was proud of my creativity, my independence. And look where that independence got you. Madison gestured dismissively at me. Working in a tiny gallery, living in a studio apartment, crashing events to feel important. Michael, the security guard, looked increasingly uncomfortable as our family drama unfolded in front of Boston's elite. More phones were out now, recording the confrontation. Tomorrow, this would likely be circulating in social media circles, exactly what Nathan and I had hoped to avoid. I think we should step outside, Michael suggested quietly. Elaine seized on this. Yes, Harper, it's time for you to leave. You've created quite enough of a spectacle. I looked around at the circle of faces. Family members who had known me since childhood, now regarding me with a mixture of disdain, amusement, and pity. Not one of them was willing to stand up for me, to acknowledge the truth of what had happened after my father died. In that moment, I realized Nathan had been right about one thing. I needed closure. But closure didn't mean their acceptance or approval. It meant finally accepting that these people were never going to be the family I deserved. Fine, I said, straightening my shoulders. I'll go. I turned toward the exit, dignity intact despite everything. As Michael gently guided me toward the door, I heard Madison's voice behind me. "Don't forget to return that dress to whatever discount rack you found it on." Laughter rippled through the group, and I felt my cheeks burning. Just a few more steps to the door, and I could escape this nightmare. I glanced at my watch again. Nathan would be arriving any minute, but suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted him to witness this humiliation. I reached for my phone to text him to meet me outside instead, when the ballroom doors swung open. Nathan Reed stood in the doorway, a commanding presence in his tailored tuxedo. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and confident posture, he naturally drew attention even before people recognized who he was. Tonight, he looked every inch the successful tech mogul, poised, powerful, and completely out of place in my family drama. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the unusual spectacle near the center, me, with a security guard's hand still on my elbow, surrounded by Elaine, Madison, and a circle of onlookers with their phones raised. "Harper," he called, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The room went quiet as Nathan strode purposefully across the ballroom. I watched recognition dawn on the faces around me, first confusion, then shock. Nathan Reed wasn't just any businessman. He was one of Boston's most influential entrepreneurs and philanthropists. The security guard, Michael, immediately dropped his hand from my arm, straightening his posture. "Sir, there seems to be some confusion." "Harper, what's going on?" Nathan asked, ignoring Michael and taking my hands in his. Before I could answer, Elaine stepped forward, her social mask firmly back in place. "Mr. Reed, what an unexpected honor. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Elaine Matthews, chair of the foundation hosting tonight's gala." Nathan turned to her, his expression coolly professional. "Mrs. Matthews, I know exactly who you are." Something in his tone made Elaine falter slightly. Well, yes. We're so pleased you could join us tonight. Though I'm afraid we were just dealing with a small situation. My wife appears to be surrounded by security and being filmed without her consent," Nathan interrupted, his voice level but firm. "That's the situation I'm concerned about." The word wife landed like a bomb in the silent ballroom. Madison's mouth actually fell open, her phone still recording, but now hanging limply at her side. "Wife?" Elaine repeated, looking rapidly between Nathan and me. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. Harper is my stepdaughter, but she's not. We've been married for 2 years, Nathan stated flatly. Though given the reception she's receiving, I understand why she's kept her connection to the Matthews family private from our social circle." The implications of his statement weren't lost on anyone in earshot. Nathan Reed, whose social circle included governors, senators, and international business leaders, found the Matthews family lacking, not the other way around. Madison recovered first, stepping forward with a completely transformed expression. "Harper, you should have told us." Her voice dripped with sudden sweetness. "What an amazing surprise." She moved as if to hug me, but Nathan subtly shifted his position, creating a barrier between us. "Interesting," he commented, glancing at the phone still in her hand. "You were filming my wife's humiliation moments ago, and now you want to embrace her?" Madison had the grace to look embarrassed, quickly tucking her phone away. Uncle William pushed forward, hand extended toward Nathan. "William Matthews, Thomas's brother. Wonderful to meet you, Nathan. We've followed your success with great interest." Nathan ignored the outstretched hand. "Have you? That's surprising, considering you haven't shown interest in Thomas's daughter for years." The growing crowd shifted uncomfortably. Public confrontations weren't the norm at these polished charity events, particularly not from someone of Nathan's stature. Elaine, ever the skilled social navigator, tried again. "There's clearly been a terrible misunderstanding. Harper is, of course, a beloved member of our family. We had no idea she'd married, well, someone of your prominence, Mr. Reed." And that's exactly the problem, isn't it, Mrs. Matthews? Nathan replied. Harper's value to you depends entirely on her connections and status, not on who she is as a person. By now, the entire ballroom was watching our exchange. The band had stopped playing, and even the catering staff had paused their dinner preparations. I think perhaps we should continue this conversation privately, Elaine suggested, casting nervous glances at the attentive audience. I disagree, Nathan said calmly. I think this is exactly the right setting for honesty, given what just transpired. He turned to address the wider crowd. For those who don't know me, I'm Nathan Reed, founder of Reed Innovations and the Reed Foundation. Murmurs rippled through the audience at this confirmation. What many of you may not know is that the Reed Foundation is the anonymous benefactor behind tonight's event. Gasps and whispers erupted around us. Elaine's face drained of color. That's right, Nathan continued. My foundation provided the matching grant that made this gala possible, with the stipulation of anonymity because we believed in the cause, not the recognition. He turned back to Elaine. Imagine my surprise when my wife received an invitation from her estranged stepmother, who chairs the committee for an event my foundation is funding. An invitation that, it seems, was extended only so she could be publicly humiliated. That's not true, Elaine protested weakly. There's been a misunderstanding. I heard everything, Mrs. Matthews. Nathan cut her off. As did many others in this room. You called my wife waitstaff, suggested she crash the event, and encouraged security to remove her while your daughter filmed it all for your entertainment. Madison had the decency to look mortified, but Elaine was still scrambling to salvage the situation. Mr. Reed, Nathan, surely you understand family dynamics can be complicated. Harper has always been difficult. If we'd known she was your wife, then you would have treated her with the respect she deserves? Nathan finished for her. That's precisely the problem. No one should need my name or my money to be treated with basic human dignity, least of all by their own family. I found my voice at last, squeezing Nathan's hand. It's okay. You've made your point. He looked at me, his expression softening. Are you sure? Because I'm prepared to withdraw all foundation support from any initiative connected to the Matthews name. The threat hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone, especially Elaine, whose social standing and charitable work depended heavily on major donors like the Reed Foundation. That won't be necessary, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The hospital shouldn't suffer because of family drama. Elaine seemed to collapse with relief, but I wasn't finished. However, I continued, turning to face my stepmother directly. I think it's time for some changes in how the foundation operates. Nathan nodded, understanding immediately. The Reed Foundation will continue to support Boston Children's Hospital, but will require a restructuring of the event committee moving forward. Mrs. Matthews, your leadership has been educational, but I believe fresh perspectives are needed. Several hospital board members in the crowd nodded in agreement, clearly unwilling to lose the Reed Foundation's substantial support. Elaine's carefully constructed facade cracked completely. You can't do that. The Matthews Family Foundation has chaired this event for 15 years. The Matthews Family Foundation exists because of my father's hard work, I reminded her. Work that I was systematically excluded from after his death. Consider this long overdue course correction. Madison stepped forward, desperation evident in her expression. Harper, be reasonable. We're family. No, I interrupted firmly. We're not. Family doesn't humiliate each other for sport. Family doesn't erase someone's existence when it's inconvenient. What we are is people who share a legal connection through my father, nothing more. The brutal honesty of my statement silenced her. For perhaps the first time in her life, Madison had no clever retort. One by one, relatives who had been eager to join in my humiliation moments before approached with awkward apologies and sudden reminiscences about how they'd always admired my independence. I received their overtures politely but without enthusiasm. Their transparent attempts at damage control too little, too late. Nathan and I gradually made our way toward our assigned table, which, ironically, was at the front of the room, placement befitting the event's major donor. As we moved through the crowd, I heard the whispers. Can you believe Elaine tried to throw out Nathan Reed's wife? Did you see Madison filming at all? How mortifying. They say Harper had no idea her husband was funding the event. Smart move keeping her maiden name professionally proves she's not trading on his success. The evening proceeded with strained politeness. Elaine performed her duties as hostess mechanically, unable to meet my eyes during her speech thanking the generous anonymous donor whose identity was now common knowledge among the attendees. When dinner was served, Nathan leaned close to me. We can leave if you want. You've more than made your point. I considered it, then shook my head. Actually, I'd like to stay. For the first time, I'm at a family event entirely on my own terms. He smiled, understanding. Then we stay. But just so you know, you look stunning tonight. That dress was made for you. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Better than a waitress uniform? Infinitely, he replied, raising his glass in a private toast. To my extraordinary wife, who needed neither my name nor my money to shine. I clinked my glass against his, finally able to see the evening for what it truly was, not a humiliation, but a liberation. The days following the gala brought a flurry of calls, emails, and even handwritten notes, all from family members suddenly eager to reconnect with their long-lost relative. I recognized these overtures for what they were, damage control, not genuine remorse. Cousin Brandon sent flowers to the gallery today, I told Nathan that evening as we relaxed in our living room. The card said he values family above all else and hopes we can rebuild our connection. Nathan raised an eyebrow. The same Brandon who said you never belonged in the family? The very same, I confirmed, curling more comfortably into the couch. Amazing how quickly perspectives change when money and influence enter the equation. What did you do with the flowers? Nathan asked. Donated them to the children's ward at the hospital, I replied. Seemed fitting. The most surprising development came 3 days after the gala, when my father's sister Janet, who had maintained careful neutrality during the years of Elaine's reign, requested to meet for coffee. Unlike the others, Janet had never been actively cruel, just passively absent. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe near the gallery. She arrived looking nervous, clutching her purse like a shield. Thank you for seeing me, Harper, she began after ordering her coffee. I owe you an apology, one that has nothing to do with your husband or his position. I waited, curious about where this was going. I knew what Elaine was doing to you after Thomas died, she admitted, her voice tight with regret. I saw how she isolated you, how she manipulated the family narrative to paint you as difficult and ungrateful. And I did nothing. The raw honesty surprised me. Why? I asked simply. Janet sighed. The cowardly reasons, fear of confrontation, fear of being excluded myself. But also because I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I was wrong. When we see injustice in our family and stay silent, we become complicit. Her words resonated more deeply than any of the shallow apologies I'd received. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. I don't expect forgiveness, Janet continued. But I want you to know that not everyone believed Elaine's version of events. Some of us were just too weak to stand against her. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Janet shared stories about my father that I'd never heard, how he'd struggled with depression after my mother died, how he'd been manipulated by Elaine but had always kept photos of me in his private office, away from her disapproving eyes. He loved you, Harper, Janet insisted. His biggest failure was not protecting you from Elaine, and I think that shame made it harder for him to connect with you as you got older. It wasn't a complete healing, but it was something, a small piece of my father returned to me through honest conversation. As the weeks passed, Nathan and I made decisions about which family relationships were worth salvaging. Janet became a regular presence in our lives, along with two cousins who reached out with genuine remorse rather than opportunistic networking attempts. Elaine and Madison were conspicuously silent after their initial flurry of damage control messages went unanswered. According to Janet, they were facing significant social fallout. Several board members had requested Elaine's resignation from the foundation, and Madison's social media influence had taken a hit when clips of her filming my humiliation circulated among Boston's elite. I took no pleasure in their difficulties, but I felt no obligation to rescue them either. Some bridges, once burned, should remain crossed off the map. The most meaningful development came 6 months after the gala, when Nathan and I established the Thomas Matthews Art Therapy Foundation, dedicated to providing creative healing programs for children dealing with grief and family trauma. "We're not just reclaiming your father's name," Nathan observed as we finalized the foundation documents. "We're redirecting it towards something that would have made him proud." At the foundation's launch event, a much smaller, warmer gathering than Elaine's ostentatious gala, I found myself surrounded by people who valued connection over status, compassion over social climbing. Janet was there, along with Nathan's parents and sister, and friends who had stood by me through years of family estrangement. During my speech that evening, I shared parts of my own journey, not for sympathy, but to highlight why our mission mattered. "Art saved me during my darkest moments," I told the attentive audience. "When I felt voiceless and invisible, creativity gave me a language to express what I couldn't say aloud. Every child deserves that outlet, that safe space to process difficult emotions." I didn't mention Elaine or the gala incident specifically, but I did address the broader lesson it had taught me. "Family isn't just about blood or legal connections," I said, looking around at the supportive faces before me. "It's about who shows up not just for celebrations and success, but during struggles and setbacks. It's about who sees your worth even when you can't see it yourself." Later that evening, as Nathan and I walked home along the Charles River, I felt a sense of peace I'd been chasing for years. "You know what the strangest part is?" I mused, watching the moonlight play on the water. "I spent so many years thinking I needed their approval to be whole. I thought if I could just make them see my worth, I'd finally feel complete. And now?" Nathan prompted gently. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Now I realize I was already whole. Their approval or disapproval doesn't define me, it never did. I just needed to believe that myself. Nathan stopped walking and turned to face me. "I've always believed it. From that first day in the gallery, when you spent an hour educating me about emerging artists without having any idea who I was or what I was worth." "You mean when I was just doing my job?" I teased. "You were doing much more than a job," he corrected. "You were championing other artists' work with such genuine passion that I couldn't help falling a little bit in love with you right then." We continued our walk in comfortable silence, the city lights reflecting on the river beside us. I thought about the long journey from that broken-hearted teenager being pushed out of her family home to the woman I was now, strong, loved, and finally free from the weight of seeking validation from those who were incapable of giving it. The gala confrontation hadn't given me the family I'd longed for as a child. Instead, it had given me something more valuable, the freedom to create my own definition of family, to build connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or status. If you're watching this and struggling with family rejection or conditional love, please know that your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes the family we create for ourselves, through friendships, marriage, mentorship, can heal the wounds left by the family we were born into. Don't give up on finding your people, the ones who will value you for exactly who you are. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to diminish you? Or have you found your chosen family more supportive than your biological one? Share your experiences, like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and remember, Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who can't love you properly, even when they share your name. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the courage to define your own worth, independent of anyone else's assessment. The freedom on the other side is worth every difficult step of the journey.